Welcome to the Audiation in the Wild podcast with your hosts, Bo Talifer and Eric Rasmussen. Episode 36. Special guest, James Jordan. I want to apologize for the audio quality. We had to use the Zoom audio, but I hope you find the content worthwhile. So welcome, Jim Jordan. I know of you from my first days at Temple University. You're one of the few dissertations up on the shelf already. And I'm just curious, before that and your 30 books, or I don't know how many books you have.
Actually, it's over 60 now.
60.
Yeah, it's a little crazy.
That's amazing. And all that, what hooked you into Gordon? How did you find out about him, or MLT, or what came first? God.
Well, I'll make a long story short. I was done my master's. I was in a high school in Lewisburg. And of course, I was thinking about doctoral programs. I was accepted at USC at the time, and I was accepted with Robert Fountain at the University of Wisconsin, actually. Okay. And the problem I had was I had such an incredible program with Elaine Brown at Temple. The DMA looked like more of same. And I would have done it, I think, but my high school choir was singing a PMEA convention. And we did our dress rehearsal, and I had about an hour and a half of time off, and in the next room, there was a sign that said, Edwin Gordon, Temple University Music Learning Theory. Well, since I was a Temple alum, I didn't know they hired, because I was not in the music ed bid.
Right.
And I went in and listened. And I thought, okay, this is right up my alley. So I introduced myself to Ed, and we went and had coffee, actually. And I told him about my doctoral dilemma, and he said, well, you have such a good master's degree. He said, what do you want out of a doctorate? And I said, I want to teach better. And he said, well, then you should come and study with me. Of course he would say that.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, I'm interested in growing musically. And he said, well, I'll allow you to transfer credits in from whoever you want to study with. So I went to Europe and studied with Wilhelm Amann and Frauke Hasemann. And, it wasn't enough that I had Elaine Brown, but then to be with Ed in those years, Eric, from 1979 through 86, which I think is prime learning theory.
Yes.
Maria Ronfula calls she and I the midwives of music learning theory. We were there at the birth.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of funny, but it's true. It was a godsend. And, Ed and I was one of the few graduate students that remained on good terms with Ed. It was an honor to know him and call him my friend. He was passionate about me completing that into the choral rehearsal book, which is basically learning theory based. And I think he'd be very proud of the new book that's coming out, which is called Intonational Solfege. Which is the question, Eric, if I could just share a short story about Ed.
Yeah, please.
In the first Sugarloaf, I went to the first Sugarloaf in Chestnut Hill, and Ed was doing his learning theory, and he was going through his pattern thing, with the hands going and don't sing, and he's singing patterns, and I sat there and I asked the question, and that was what I did was the smartest thing of my whole career. I put my hand up and I said, Dr. Gordon, I understand the potency of pattern teaching, but when do you teach intonation? And he flipped out. He said, I sing in tune, you sing in tune. Well, the reality is nobody sings in tune. And I was concerned about where does a kid learn to sing a pattern in tune? And so I shut up. I just took it. I kept it for years. And then about 3 years ago, I was at a TMEA convention, and Alec Harris asked me to go to a new solfege book session. And I'm sitting there, and I'm going, well, this is all well and good, but it's not learning theory, all right. But it was interval replication, and nobody was teaching anybody to sing in tune. So what good is that in a choral ensemble or any musicianship? So what I came up with um, were several things. I think a key to doing patterns, Eric, you may have heard me talk at the Gimel convention, but the key to it is, as much as I adore Ed, singing patterns on bum 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 is not good. Okay,
Right. Mm-hmm.
you can't sing them in tune. So this idea of singing patterns on a mixed valve, the German Umlaut, which keeps the tongue in a high position and ensuring consistent pitch. And then the other thing is I found that I go on sounding the dominant of the key that the pattern is in will cause people to sing in tune automatically. And playing the dominant above, which I also shared with everybody, I'm now the whole. So what I did was I had new long, I would say 12 to 16 bar pieces written by my former student John Hudson. He's a student of Paul Mealer. He's in London. And then I extracted out of those patterns. So it goes beyond the listening book I wrote many years ago for tonic and dominant patterns, and I've extracted the difficult patterns out of these new tunes, which are with accompaniment, by the way. That's the other thing that I think Ed's big statement, which you have to dig for, but I think it's his most important statement, is we don't learn anything out of context.
Exactly.
And I think that is the thing that I think a lot of music learning theorists lose sight of.
Yeah.
And then the question is, what is context?
Yeah. There's harmonic and tonal and rhythmic and
well, it's harmonic context.
That's a horse that Eric and I have beaten quite a bit on this podcast, that not having accompaniment, it's not properly simulating the context that people are going to be musically active in their regular musical lives. And so to not include that in the training, it just doesn't make any sense harmonically.
Well, the new book has all the accompaniments that John has written, with dominance buried in prominently. The other thing that's in the book that I think is remarkable, first of all, the recordings, the patterns, are going to be recorded by Voce Sain, because I want every student to hear incredible singing, in tune singing, and artistic singing. I mean, phrasing, these exercises have to be done incredibly musically.
Let's tell people who might not understand that you're at Westminster Choir College, and this is your elite group. And you've got how many years there?
Yeah, 32.
There you go.
So I've used all of this, Eric, last year coming out of the pandemic. I learned a lot in the pandemic what is important. Music learning theory saved my butt in the pandemic. Because when you come down and ask the questions, what's essential to music teaching? One of my colleagues said, can you teach a choir online? Absolutely. I think I spent more time on them listening before they sang anything. They tested everything individually in the context. We learned everything on the mixed valve. The issue with the mixed valve for singers is that intonation problems are caused because of registration problems in a choir. And if you can put that baby to bed, which a mixed valve does, intonation problems are almost non-existent. As long as Bo said, it's in context, you can never sing a part of it alone. So all of this was very exciting. I mean, it was a very simplistic, I think simplified to the essence of what's important, and that's what I did all last year at the choirs. There's a new warm-up book coming out that speaks to this too. So.
Yeah, and you have these special resonator bars that you've used.
It's the Malmart choir chimes, and they are the only instrument in the world that produces only a fundamental. Because that's the other thing that was happening. If I play alternating octaves of the dominant above the ensemble, the problem is that the octave is not quite in tune, and also one of those pitches has more overtones in than the other. And it was the gifted kids that were they would make a choice. If they go with the one that's more overtones, then they sing sharp, or go with the other one, which isn't quite in tune. The choir chimes eliminated that problem. In fact, it's so powerful. If I teach a piece on a mixed vowel, and then also the solfege system I have that I use is basically choirs only sing in major. I keep them all in major, and I keep changing their solfege so they sing in major. It's interval. The solfege system is an intonation system. It's not a literacy system.
Yeah.
So by sounding that chime, for some reason, it's like a magnet. It just pulls everybody in tune. And there's a normal illusion that happens, Eric, that after they hear the chime, you pull the chime away, and they still hear where they are. It's just a kind of gyroscope for pitch, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon around either my friends or a few people who've been guests on this show, where we have been drumming the beat for harmonic audiation, harmonic understanding, so that we contextualize. And then harmonic form is something that you write about in your latest book that I have, the Inside the Choral Rehearsal. And I would like for you to speak about harmonic form a little bit and how that keeps the music moving forward. Your relationship with the Laban elements and rhythm is a little bit different than most the music learning theory people understand it to be.
Well, I think because I'm a conductor, I've now kind of, after all these years, understand what a conductor really does. And what a conductor does is part human, obviously, but it's also about how one moves sound forward. And I think there's a confusion, Eric, between rhythm and harmonic rhythm. Most conductors conduct the rhythm. They don't conduct the harmonic rhythm. And if that's where all the information is. It's the difference between being something in 6/8 and something being in 12/8. If you listen to the harmonic rhythm, it's clearly at 12/8, it's not at 6/8. And so the ability to break away from a measure signature and listen to what the message is. Look, the examples I always give, Mendelssohn, in essence, Mendelssohn's harmonic rhythm is always different from his notated measure signature. Every piece. Go look at it if you don't believe me. And I think he was just assuming, I sound like it, but I think Mendelssohn was assuming people would be musical. I know that sounds facetious. But when you have, and that's the other thing, that being at Oxford and having to learn chant, there is a visual encumbrance with notation, which, that's what Ed's problem was. It's sound before sign, it's sound before symbol. And so, for me, forcing choirs to listen to harmonic rhythm, and the other issue with harmonic rhythm is how the breath actually moves in singers. That's the speed of the breath. That is the untold magic formula. And then the Laban comes in, Eric, because too much weight will slow that harmonic rhythm. You have to figure out the amount of weight in your hands to move the sound forward. That is where Ed's idea, it's on the website. I hope people know that the last conversation I had with him on Into the Choral Rehearsal, the CD comes with the book, but it's there's a free download on the GI website.
Wonderful, because I've listened to that CD a few times. I want to tell people, I am not a choral I'm an early childhood guy and a general music guy in the early years. I've gotten more out of your book than I have out of other MLT books uh, in the last probably 15, 20 years. This Inside the Choral Rehearsal really opens up some possibilities that go beyond the choral. Uh, it got me thinking a little bit differently about some of the things that I do. And I'm always looking for the next, how do I get better? How am I getting better? How do I get my students to get better at these things? And I've always accompanied, at times, I don't accompany, but there are times, most of the time I am accompanying them, not with these bells, which I'd love to have, but at any rate, accompanying with the harmonic structure underneath and obviously setting tonality down before they do their tonal patterns.
Well, the other thing
we sing songs,
there's a big misnomer, and I have to be careful how I say this. Eric, you worked with Ed, but Ed was great to work with because he always wanted to know what you were thinking. And when I stumbled on this Laban thing because of Dale Polk, who taught at Temple, I went to Ed. I was so excited. I said, I don't really understand it yet. I have to do more study. But this is it. And I explained to him flow, weight, time, space. Okay? And time, weight, and space interact to create flow, according to Laban. That makes him different than Dalton's.
Yes.
What Ed heard, which was new to Ed's ear, was flow. Ed grabbed onto flow, so that's why in all of Ed's writing he talks about free flow. Well, where in learning sequences in music, he does talk about Laban and free flow, but Laban never talked about free flow. That was Ed's interpretation. But the fact of the matter, time, weight, and space interact and create flow. So one of the curricular things that nobody knows about Laban is that his love was movement curricula for children. That was his first love. So the book Modern Educational Dance is a curricula that constantly manipulates time, weight, space, so students could experience flow. Not free. I hate to say it. There's no free about it. It is mitigated by time, weight, and space. This is a huge misunderstanding in the MLT community. Mm-hmm. And thereby, flow is harmonic rhythm. And then you have to mitigate time, weight, space in your hands to associate with the harmonic rhythm. Nobody gets that. So every time I see people doing the free flow thing, I'm like, yeah, that's great for exploration, but that's not going to transfer to rhythm literacy. Now, moving one, because I know it was in one of your emails and I didn't forget about it. So this whole thing about space audiation that Ed kind of blurted out in that CD, I was smart to put on my iPad. For some reason, I never record anything. And I'm so glad because I went to him to talk to him about harmonic rhythm and chant, about teaching musicianship and that there's no bar lines, it's visually kind of
right.
pristine.
You're talking about traditional 12th
Yeah,
century, 13th century chant.
Pneumatic, yes. So that was the Discovering Chant book, and I think that's a necessary part. But as you remember from that conversation, he then pivoted quickly. Of course, I made the number one mistake. I used the music theory term, which was harmonic rhythm, which is Walter Pistons. I don't really. Yeah. His point about musical terms, I do understand, because it depends who taught you on what your definition of harmonic rhythm is. And so he said, I want to use space audiation. And then the more I thought of it, when I'm conducting, I'm perceiving in audiation how sound moves forward. Now let me just share with you. I've already written it, and I've been working on a book on musical interpretation, which is broad brush strokes of stuff. But let me tell you what I finally put together. Okay, so space audiation is neurological. You can imagine yourself audiating music, and you can imagine yourself moving to it if you move to it. Okay? But here's the problem. With my conductors this year, I had a problem getting them to understand the big journey, the large phrase. Now, here it is, the new thing. Nobody better steal it because it's already written and copyrighted. But so it's a little semantic play in a Gordon sense. Harmonic rhythm, you can audiate space, but the issue is when you're looking at harmonic rhythm, you're also tied to notation. I'm interested in what's the long journey of an entire piece. This was inspired by a statement on YouTube by Esa-Pekka Salon that said, as a conductor, we have to exist in several time zones. There's the immediate, there's the slightly ahead, and then he says, if you're conducting a Wagner opera, you're 15 minutes ahead. It's the 15 minutes ahead that fascinated me. And guess what? It's a slight turn. So now I'm talking about space audiation and spatial audiation. If you're thinking about the entire shape of a piece, you have to live in that bigger space as you're conducting, or else it turns out to look like sound like the notation, which is all chopped up. So neurologically, that is indeed possible. No one's ever talked about it until now. And so I think there is a definition between space audiation, which is phrase by phrase, if I could break that up, how a phrase moves in its shape, but then there's a bigger spatial audiation. And it was my graduate students who I asked them to graph what an entire phrase was. And when they got the idea that they were drawing a graph for a larger piece, that's when the conducting changed. That's when truly they plugged into the harmonic rhythm. So all of it has to do with audiation, and I don't think, I wish Ed was alive because I'd want to poke him a little bit about the differences between space audiation and spatial audiation. I don't think his thought had gone that far because he was just thinking about harmonic rhythm, as is on that recording, and how sound moves forward. And that was me until I struggled with my own graduate students and teaching them conducting. They were conducting what they were seeing in smaller pods.
Yes.
And that kind of didn't make the big musical picture. And I think, thinking all the way back to Elaine Brown, Eric, I think all Elaine did was conduct big ideas. I mean, I think we don't think, Mark Rothko said famously, I paint ideas. And I think for me, what a conductor does is having all the knowledge of music learning theory, but ultimately painting ideas.
Yeah.
And that has to do with audiation.
James, I find that very exciting because I don't have a hand in the choral world. I mean, my interest is as a jazz musician primarily, but I think a lot of the things you're describing are the reasons that people aren't improvising coherently. If you think of harmonic rhythm and space audiation and spatial audiation, you're actually painting an idea over time that is eloquently stated instead of just meaningless, metrically relevant phrases that are produced theoretically because they line up with where the chord happens to be in the bar line.
Exactly.
And so I think there's a huge tie to improv here, and you can even see this in the way jazz musicians talk about turnarounds. Take us home. The analogies are often spatial in terms of how the harmonic form of the song is going to proceed, and that's something that I've noticed that parallels the way you're describing conducting, which is really exciting.
Let me give you another tidbit that for choral musicians this is important, and I think for anybody that teaches folk songs to children or teaches words to songs. So for me, if you listen to all of the recordings that I've done with Williamson and the same stream, if you listen really carefully, the choirs sing legato. And that is meaning the role of diction is not to double down on rhythm. The rhythm is in the macro, micro, and melodic rhythm. It's there. To use diction to add additional accent destroys the musicianship of the person and certainly doesn't create any energy for a line. So all of my choirs, basically, if I could summarize it, sing legato. But here's the thing that will blow you away. This is new. This is like 3 weeks new. Simon Jackson, who teaches at Cambridge, and he is the Peterhouse Choir, one of the colleges at Cambridge, came to the Oxford Institute 3 years ago. We're good friends. His thing is about poetry and language. And he forwarded me, Eric, I will send this to you because this will blow your mind. An article that was written by a woman at Bard College in Washington State, where she talks about the audiation of text. Unbelievable. She has a music ed degree and she knows Gordon. But her whole article is that for people who sing text, you have to audiate it silently first, not speak it. And it took me aback because every time I work a score, I do not speak the text in rhythm. I speak the text to myself. I audiate it. And then there is no coincidence with vertical alignment and text. Look, Eric, it's like on clarinet. How I use my tongue on clarinet is what diction is to the singer. The articulation on my clarinet may align with the meter of the moment or the rhythm of the moment, but generally, it is the vehicle by which you can play a musical line. So this whole idea that this woman, she went through Milton, she had quotes from John Milton, I mean, everybody about hearing text silently. And so this is the first article on that I know where audiation of text, poetry, is to be silent, not spoken. The next stage for me is spoken because you have to feel after you hear it. Then there has to be the teeth to the tongue thing with singers. But this whole idea of silently audiating text. So then, Eric, I'm not, middle school, elementary school, classroom teaching is not my bag. But the implication is when you're teaching songs to children, do we ever teach them to audiate the words, or are we always audiating the words with the tune? I think musicianship, the key to musicianship is, look, I thought of this, Eric, when I was in elementary school, why did teachers always tell us to read silently? I don't know the answer to that, but I know I always in class, we were not allowed to whisper or speak the text. We had to read silently. Well, they didn't know learning theory. They didn't know about audiation. But we learned language through silent audiation. So this whole thing about words being dumped on top of when we're teaching songs, I don't think is legitimate in terms of building musicianship in children.
Yeah. It occurs to me a little bit that you can't work both brains at the same time, the musical brain and the language brain, so that you've got to give them something that's in the background while you promote, right, what's in the foreground. So bring the music to the foreground and put the words in like they're already there.
That's correct. That's correct. So that's new information, and I'll forward the article to you, but it's an incredible scholarly article, first of all. It's about 15 pages. And the bottom line, she and I are going to Zoom when school gets started and I get calm. In fact, I'm going to have her zoom into my grad conducting class. But for her to make the connection that I never made, I mean, what I was saying is that choir sings more legato. What I'm really getting at is we don't, even when you're teaching solo singers, they don't audiate that they're always associating diction with rhythm. They mutually inhabit a pulse, but they carry sound. Diction carries sound, and it is not the rhythm. See, this is the other thing that choral people keep on saying, that the diction is the rhythm. No, it's not. The rhythm is the rhythm. It's, you know, the old Robert Shaw quote. Robert Shaw would say, choir, I'm out of the rhythm business. Robert Shaw didn't know learning theory, but Robert Shaw understood. Rhythm is your responsibility, and if they couldn't do it, he would do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and you would count. Genius in that nobody's ever figured out. When you put the text with it, the diction inhabited more than 1. I say to the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I say to. The diction wasn't I say to.
Right.
He built in a system by which the choir would sing more legato. I wish Robert was alive so I could ask him that question. Because he worked, you know, going all the way back, you know, he was responsible for the Fred Waring tone songs.
Yeah.
So it all comes full circle. But this idea about audiating text separate from the music and hearing it, speaking it silently without the music. And Eric, you're totally right. The issue is here when you're speaking text, you're in another side of your brain, which isn't music. Don't ask me how that combinatory act happens.
Yeah.
That's way beyond our pay grades.
Yeah, I was playing in a traditional jazz band, you know, 1930s, 20s style last night, and you know what? As soon as I started thinking, I went haywire. I just interrupted myself. I had to put to bed something and just leave the harmonic form. It's the only thing I can tell you that I was just drifting in the sea of the flow of the band and especially the tuba player. And that's all I can tell you. I don't know what I played last night. The times that I didn't play what I liked at all, it was because I was trying to concentrate on something. And I think there's something to be said about this spatial audiation, and I'll have to find out some more about that when your books come out, the difference between that and space audiation and harmonic rhythm and the combination of that. But one thing that I did notice afterwards, the breath that I took before I started to play. So I would just listen to the tuba, and I would throw all caution to the wind, and then I'd let something take over, and my fingers could do what it wanted to do, and my whatever technique comes in. But this breath was important, and this is anticipatory. Before you even audiate, you're taking a breath to gather in information. Is kind of what I understand from your book.
Yeah, actually, it's uploaded, and you know the other thing I think that I know my conductors would tell me, Sam, sitting here, but the job of the conductor is to allow, and being armed with good pedagogy, which is learning theory. Your job on the podium is to listen and allow, and to move the big picture. It's the big picture. Stop micromanaging, trust people. I mean, all of this, you know, which I've written plenty about, but this ability to just trust that this miracle that is music making happens. But I do think what learning theory has taught me is there is an efficient way to teach all this. I would say that the old system of teaching diction to choirs was fine. It was inefficient, to borrow Ed's term. I think there's a better way to get at musicianship. So, I mean, it's all exciting to me because I think what learning theory has done for my life is it's allowed me to think like a intelligent human being and tackle big problems that nobody else is talking about, and thankfully I can write about it. The Intonational Solfege book will be out literally, I think, next week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite the read. We also, Eric, in there, one of my students, Dan Wells, we went into every mode and showed people those scale degrees that have to be tuned several cents higher for the mode to tune. I also talk about, we don't talk about with our choirs or even our children how to teach them to sing a couple cents sharp to the piano so they don't sound flat. That's an acoustic phenomenon. That's not an audiational phenomenon. No one ever told me that when my choir sings with an orchestra, the choir has to learn to sing the pitch and then sharp it about 5 cents to be in tune with the string players, because every string player does that.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I notice when I play guitar pieces, classical pieces. If I'm in a certain key, even if my guitar is in tune, I prefer, some of the strings to just be slightly tuned sharp. Like, if I play a key, if I'm in G and then I'm going to play in D flat the next song, I won't like the guitar being in just like a total standard
Correct.
tuning. It'll bother me, and often halfway through the song, I'm tuning the G string up a little bit or down.
Yeah, there's a book written. What we did was try to summarize a genius book by Aldhall, Alddahl, called Choral Intonation. He teaches at the Stockholm Conservatory, and it's a very nerdy book on intonation, where he goes and puts a scope on every scale and shows you the volatile things. Well, look, if you're in a mode, you need to know how to adjust your ear and to teach the contextual way of singing in tune in that mode.
So can I ask you a question about this, just to make sure we have like a concrete example? So if we're in Dorian and you were to sing the major sixth off the root, or if we're in major and you sing the major sixth off the root, you're saying those major sixths, I know I'm using an interval here, but they would not be sung in the same way. Like you might have
Correct.
to adjust one subtly. And that's something I've noticed, but I've never talked to someone knowledgeable enough to actually unpack that. I just noticed that I'd do it.
Yeah, and for example, the easiest one and the most radical one, nobody likes to sing in C major. It's hard to tune. We all know that. Do you know why? It's totally because of the 6th degree of the scale. So that has to be literally 6 to 10 cents sharp to pull the other scale degrees in tune. So obviously, by talking about contextual singing in context, we open up a whole other can of intonational worms.
Well, exactly, because if you don't have music, if you don't have learning theory behind you, and you're just learning to sing intervals that are not context dependent, your major sixth that you've supposedly memorized from a song is not going to serve you in these other tonalities, and even in these other specific locations in a tonality, because there's more than one major sixth in a tonality, obviously.
So that's the other thing. The Intonational Solfege Teacher's Manual is about 240 pages, where I literally go through everything. Vowels you teach on, why this works. I mean, to me, it is, I wouldn't say the last step, but the step we all needed, who deal with performing groups. I'm not necessarily so sure what all the takeaways are for classroom music, but I do know for performing groups, it's very different. To get a choir to sing in tune is subjective to begin with. So anyway, it's pretty exciting for me. It's been, that book and the new choral warm-up book, which is just about finished. Like, it's 2 days away. I just got to do a little tweaking. And then this interpretive book, which I hope to have out by next summer for my Oxford course, just deals with phrasing in general, ideas, and the bigger shapes, which I think we need.
I wanted to ask you to unpack that we've been dancing around this whole topic of the bigger shapes, or the paragraphs of music, if you will, because it often seems like the problem that people are getting into, whether it's choral or instrumental, is that their mind is, whether they're audiating or not, you can have your attention placed at the wrong, almost magnification level. Like when people are improvising, they're like focusing on macro beats instead of the whole 16 bars or 15 minutes of the Mendelssohn piece, and that's often like the a point of trouble we can get into. It seems like whether you're conducting or improvising, and it often seems like this problem of context just keeps coming up again and again. People's attention is not put on the right level of context.
Well, never underestimate the power of visual context. You look at a score and there's all this vertical. I mean, my job with the conductor is to get them to stop seeing the vertical black notes. I mean, if the piece is not put in the ear in the right way, then you're in the prison of the black notes. I mean, that's what chant has taught us. There are no bar lines. All you see is shapes. And I guess what I'm finding out teaching graduate students is it's all about shape. That's it. And the great conductors do this. I mean, they're seeing ideas. I mean, I think that's what Yannick Necessitine does so beautifully. He's gifted at seeing the big journey and guiding people on a journey. It's not, and I think it's for ensemble teaching, I think that's what's important. I think the danger with learning theory is that you don't go to the next level. You don't figure out how those skills then are carried into the music making. And Ed so often says, he used to call it classroom application. He says, it's not my job. I don't have enough time in my life to do this. And that was his thing to me. He kept bugging me about the choral application. And I said, Ed, this ain't no easy thing. And he read that book, Eric, he read, and I just wanted to know from him that I was on the right track and that I wasn't offending or anything contrary to music learning theory, and it's not. But, so, it's exciting for me, and again, there's not a day that I'm not thankful that I've been with Ed. I've got to show you something.
He's made just a massive, massive difference for me in my life, just trying to learn from the children. And in so doing, I find out what I need to do.
So, that I have a picture which I will never share that he sent me from Oxford. And the first quote in that book is, he was slipping away, but he told his daughter to send me this goddamn quote. And it's the one that opens the book. It's on the first page before there's any text. Like, the children quote. He also sent me in an envelope. It's over my shoulder here to show you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll hold it still but there's this picture here. Let me just show it. I'll put it right on. So it's a picture of Ed.
Yeah, with the cane on it, with the tree and the
but you notice it's signed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what he did? He stuck them in an envelope and he said, "This is a true story." He said, "I'm sending you 2 signed pictures so you don't forget me." That's Ed Gordon the idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, are you kidding?
Yeah.
So I mean, and I think as time goes on, the contribution will be enormous. I do get worried that it was the same concern he expressed about Kodai. Kodai was meant to be used and expanded, not relegated to dogma. And what I'm finding is, in choral music, I don't think across music learning theory people have embraced the ideas at all. They just think it's pattern teaching and that's what we do. And that is important for beginning skill acquisition and audiation acquisition. But what do we do when we perform music? What learning theory can inform our teaching. And so that's what I've tried to do. And I think I've been reasonably successful. Only because I'm at Westminster,
Well, you've made some really powerful contributions to music learning theory on a whole, not just choral. In my interpretation and how I listened to what you offered at the keynote, at the last Kimmel conference in 21,
Yeah.
I took those ideas home with me. Some of them, your ideas reinforced my own about the context of and harmony is my thing. I've developed a harmonic aptitude test that works with 2.5-year-olds,
Wow.
some of them, and 3-year-olds, many of them, or most of them. And it comes before you can give the other Audi aptitude measures, tonal and rhythm. So I think makes it more more of a difference getting those kids earlier, because earlier then is light years bigger than earlier between the ages of 5 and 6, when you can do PMMA or IMMA and like that. So I've been digging hard on this harmonic thing, and then I've also developed my harmonic sequence such that I can get 3 and 4-year-olds to tell me tonic dominant and subdominant functions using a different language for them. Like, here's where you end, and here's where you don't end. Start there. And then, we have a new one. And then in that, I started to, and Bo and I talked a little bit off air one time, and then we actually haven't published this episode yet, but I'm inquiring into, we have these stages of audiation, where you got the momentary retention, you go all the way up. You're very familiar, and our audience is. But we started to take, and I'm curious as to your thoughts on this, because tonal and tonal harmonic audiation is different than harmonic gestalt audiation. A one chord doesn't sound like bum, bum, bum when you take them separately. That you can hear the tonic function differently than you hear simple, 3 notes that make up the tonic function. And so those things are different. So I'm looking at the stages of audiation, and instead of using tonal and rhythm patterns that you're recalling from pieces you've heard in the past and all that, where does harmony fit in that? Can you, right?
Well, that's a big issue that I think experiencing harmony in context is one. That's the oral of it, that you experience yourself in a context of pitches. I also think that harmonic rhythm and being submerged is highly subjective, and I do think it is connected with kinesthetic ability. So one of the things in the book that I wrote about the choral ensemble with the movement warm-up is, and it's a tool I use to have choir step the harmonic rhythm using the ball of their foot, because we know that, this is something that goes back to just early childhood. We input rhythm in our joints. This is back into the 19th century in terms of psychological thought. So if you step on the ball of your foot, not on your full foot, and you have to figure out how to move at a slower pace than the rhythm, that uploads some context for what you're talking about. I think we will never know how the brain combines all of this into what we call music. I think we're foolish to try to figure it out. All I do know is that how sound moves is taught different than the tonal context, which is learning theory. So for me, moving is a big activity. And that's why, we do tonal warm-ups with the choir. Why don't we do movement warm-ups? Because the movement determines how the breath moves, hence it determines how the harmonic rhythm is moving.
Yeah.
So
I've experienced that myself. If you have even a song with just 1 and 5, or 1 and something else that's not 1, it almost feels natural to put the other chord like physically off to the side of you, like boom, 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 boom. Like it feels like the body wants to shift over, and the breathing kind of aligns with that. And Eric, you were describing earlier, where you're playing with these playing trumpet with these jazz guys, and the breathing is lined up with the harmonic form. But I found as a guitarist, like other guitarists often ask me, why my breathing is weird when I play. That's the way they say it. But my breathing is lining up as if I was going to sing my phrases, but it almost has nothing to do with the vocal side of it. It's more the audiation side of it, the breathing. Even if I'm playing the guitar and not singing, it's my breathing is set up as if I was going to sing the thing, which is so exciting.
Bo, do you know? And maybe Eric, it's one of my lectures that I give. But have you seen the TED Talk with Victor Wooten?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Which is all learning theory. I mean,
yeah.
Coming at it from a jazzer's point of view, he's totally right. I mean, I think we've made advances. I look at just that Burgundy book, the Into the Choral Rehearsal, for me when I got done, I felt really good about that. I've advanced it into ensemble work. I wish Gimel would pay attention to ensemble work. I'm just saying that. I think it's stuck in the classroom setting, and I think if Ed were alive, I think he'd want it. Once we didn't know how to apply it to an ensemble. Let me say it this way. So it made sense that we should teach teachers what we know how to teach. But now that all this material is out there, people come to my courses at Westminster in the summers and at some other places, Buffalo. I'm doing a new artist diploma at the William Jewell College in the Midwest, and they want to know how to get a choral ensemble to do these things, which is learning theory. Mm-hmm. But it's by the time our singers come to it, they pretty much have tonic and dominant and can make inferences. But then it's the contextual singing that we haven't dealt with. And Ed wasn't concerned about context singing. He was worried about building audiation skills, which I still believe in. Someone told Ed a number of years ago that I didn't believe in patterns. That's ridiculous. I understand in the new intonational solfege book, gets people into patterns beyond tonic and dominant that they have to audiate in a mode. So there you go. So this has been a great conversation. I hate to say it, but I gotta run to another meeting. But I'm glad we got it in here. Thank you for your patience. My schedule here is a little crazy, but we finally got it done.
We're privileged to have you, and I could have waited a year for it. It wouldn't have bothered me any. Well, just thank you so much for spending some time with us. We've got stuff for the audience to chew on, and we invite comments and questions. Just let us know, and maybe we'll be able to throw you a couple questions over email.
Perfect.
So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks so much.